In 1860, a Pony Express rider named William Buffalo Bill Cody mounted a compact bay stallion and rode 322 miles in less than 22 hours through hostile territory to deliver crucial mail. The horse that made this legendary ride possible wasn't just any Mustang, it was a Spanish Colonial Horse, a breed so perfectly adapted to frontier survival that it could travel for days without water and navigate by starlight. That bay stallion represented one of dozens of remarkable horse bloodlines that conquered the American West. These weren't the gentle ranch horses you see in movies today. These were specialized survivors, bred by necessity and shaped by the harshest conditions on Earth. Today, we're revealing 20 of the most extraordinary horse breeds that once thundered across the Wild West. Horses so perfectly adapted to frontier life that they seem almost mythical by modern standards. Some could survive for weeks in the desert without water. Others could carry a full-grown man and his gear 100 miles in a single day, and a few developed such intelligence they could navigate back home across 1,000 miles of unmarked wilderness. But every single bloodline has vanished from the earth, victims of progress, crossbreeding, and the disappearance of the harsh frontier conditions that created them. Let's ride into the forgotten world of the Wild West's most remarkable horses. 1. The original Spanish Colonial Horse. Before Hollywood westerns, before cattle ranches, the first horses to conquer the American frontier were descendants of Spanish conquistador mounts brought to the New World in the 1500s. These horses were smaller than modern breeds, usually 13-15 hands, but incredibly hardy. They had thick bone structure, extremely hard hooves, and could survive on vegetation that would starve other horses. Most importantly, they could go days without water by processing moisture from desert plants. Spanish colonial horses formed the foundation stock for almost every Western horse breed, but the pure bloodlines were gradually diluted through crossbreeding with larger European horses brought by American settlers. Famous example, Comanche, the only survivor of Custer's last stand, was a Spanish colonial horse who lived for 15 years after the battle, despite 7 arrow wounds. Why they're gone? The pure Spanish bloodlines were bred out by the 1880s as ranchers wanted larger horses for cattle work. 2. The Pony Express Mustang. The Pony Express required a very specific type of horse, small enough to carry a lightweight rider quickly, tough enough to maintain speed over rough terrain, and smart enough to navigate dangerous routes in all weather conditions. Pony Express Mustangs were selected from wild herds across Nevada, California, and Wyoming. They averaged 14 hands high and could maintain a gallop for 10 to 15 miles before needing replacement. More importantly, they could do this daily for months without breaking down. These horses had to be calm enough for quick rider changes, but spirited enough to maintain pace when crossing hostile Indian territory. Many learned their routes so well they could continue carrying mail even if their rider was shot. Famous example, Sylph carried mail across the treacherous Sierra Nevada route for 2 years without missing a single run, even during blizzards that closed mountain passes. Why they're gone? When the telegraph made the Pony Express obsolete in 1861, the specialized breeding program ended and the horses were absorbed into general ranch stock. 3. The California Vaquero horse. These were the ultimate cattle horses, bred by Mexican vaqueros specifically for working huge herds of semi-wild cattle across California's vast ranchos. California Vaquero horses were descendants of Spanish stock but had been selectively bred for over 200 years, specifically for cattle work. They had incredible cow sense, an intuitive understanding of cattle behavior that let them anticipate and control herd movements. These horses could work all day in brutal heat, had lightning-fast reflexes for avoiding charging bulls, and possessed the strength to drag full-grown steers to the ground for branding. Famous example, El Diablo, owned by Vaquero Juan Segan, was famous for being able to separate a specific steer from a herd of 2,000 cattle without any direction from his rider. Why they're gone? When American settlers took over California ranches after 1848, they brought larger American horses and bred out the specialized Vaquero bloodlines. 4. The Comstock Silver Mine Horse. The discovery of the Comstock lode in Nevada created demand for horses that could work in the extreme conditions of underground silver mining. These horses were bred for specific traits: compact size to fit in mine shafts, calm temperament to work underground, incredible strength to haul ore cars, and the ability to breathe thin air at high altitude. Comstock mine horses worked in shifts around the clock, hauling silver ore through narrow tunnels where a spooked horse could cause deadly cave-ins. They had to be absolutely reliable under the most unnatural conditions any horse had ever faced. Famous example, Silver King worked the Ophir mine for 8 years, hauling over $2 million worth of silver ore, and never once caused an accident in the dangerous underground environment. Why they're gone? When steam-powered equipment replaced horsepower in mining operations during the 1880s, these specialized horses were no longer needed. 5. The Texas Ranger horse. Texas Rangers needed horses that could travel vast distances across hostile territory, survive on minimal food and water, and remain calm during gunfights with desperados and hostile Indians. Texas Ranger horses were typically Spanish colonial stock crossed with captured Comanche horses, creating animals with exceptional endurance and intelligence. They had to be hardy enough to patrol territories larger than most European countries. These horses learned to remain perfectly still during long surveillance operations and could maintain a steady pace for 12-14 hours daily across desert terrain that would kill softer horses. Famous example, Captain John Coffey. Jack Hayes' stallion, Old Higgins, carried him through over 40 battles with Comanche warriors and Mexican bandits during the 1840s. Why they're gone? As Texas became more settled and law enforcement became localized, the need for these ultra-hardy patrol horses disappeared. 6. The California Gold Rush pack horse. The California Gold Rush created massive demand for horses that could carry heavy loads of mining equipment and supplies into remote mountain regions where no roads existed. These horses were bred for maximum carrying capacity and sure-footedness on steep mountain trails. They typically carried 200-300 pounds of equipment while navigating narrow ledges and loose rock that would challenge an unloaded horse. Gold Rush pack horses had to be intelligent enough to pick safe routes through dangerous terrain and calm enough to work around the noise and chaos of mining camps. Famous example, Hercules carried mining equipment to claims throughout the Sierra Nevada for 6 years, earning his owner over $50,000, equivalent to $1.5 million today, in transportation fees. Why they're gone? Railroad construction and improved roads eliminated the need for pack horses in remote mining areas. 7. The Plains Indian Warhorse. Native American tribes bred horses specifically for warfare, creating animals perfectly adapted for mounted combat tactics that terrorized frontier settlements. Plains war horses were trained from birth for battle conditions. They learned to remain calm during gunfire, could turn sharply at full speed, and would continue fighting even when wounded. Many could be guided by knee pressure alone, leaving their riders' hands free for weapons. These horses developed an almost telepathic connection with their riders and could execute complex battle maneuvers that seemed choreographed to army officers who faced them. Famous example, Chief Crazy Horse's stallion, Inyan, was known for his ability to charge directly at enemy lines, then veer away at the last second, while his rider fired arrows or rifle shots. Why they're gone? When Plains tribes were defeated and moved to reservations, their warhorse breeding programs ended and the bloodlines were lost. 8. The Overland stage horse. Before railroads connected the coasts, stagecoach travel required horses capable of maintaining schedule across 2,000 miles of dangerous frontier territory. Overland stage horses had to be fast enough to outrun bandits, strong enough to pull heavy coaches through mud and sand, and reliable enough to maintain grueling daily schedules regardless of weather. These horses worked in relay teams, with fresh horses every 10-15 miles, but each animal had to be capable of maintaining speed under the most demanding conditions. Famous example, the 6-horse team that pulled the famous Concord coach, the Flying Cloud, never missed a scheduled run during 3 years of service between San Francisco and Salt Lake City. Why they're gone? Railroad completion in 1869 ended the era of long-distance stagecoach travel and eliminated demand for these specialized horses. 9. The cattle drive horse. The great cattle drives from Texas to Kansas required horses that could work with massive herds over distances of 800-200 miles through hostile territory. Cattle drive horses needed incredible endurance, cow sense for managing herds, and the intelligence to work night shifts guarding against stampedes. They had to be tough enough to work in all weather and calm enough to avoid triggering dangerous stampedes. These horses often developed such strong bonds with specific cattle that they could locate and retrieve strayed animals from herds of thousands. Famous example, Nighthawk, owned by trail boss Charles Goodnight, could detect approaching stampedes before human guards noticed any problems, and was credited with preventing dozens of disasters. Why they're gone? Railroad expansion eliminated long cattle drives by the 1880s, ending the need for these specialized trail horses. 10. The Mountain Man. Horse mountain men who trapped beaver in the Rocky Mountains needed horses that could survive winters that killed most animals and navigate terrain where a single misstep meant death. Mountain man horses were bred for extreme cold tolerance, sure-footedness on steep terrain, and the ability to survive for weeks on minimal food when trapped by blizzards. These horses learned to find shelter, dig through snow to reach grass, and detect dangerous ice conditions that could kill horse and rider. Famous example, Jim Bridger's stallion Rocky survived 8 winters in the Yellowstone region and was famous for being able to cross frozen rivers that other horses wouldn't attempt. Why they're gone. When beaver trapping ended due to changing fashion and overhunting, mountain men disappeared and took their specialized horses with them. Before we continue with the most remarkable horses that ever lived, if you're fascinated by these forgotten breeds, smash that like button and subscribe with notifications on, because the horses coming next had abilities that will completely change how you think about what these animals were capable of. The specialized breeds we're about to reveal were so perfectly adapted to frontier conditions that they seem almost superhuman by today's standards. 11. The Pony Express Relief Horse. When regular Pony Express horses broke down or were killed by Indians, relief horses had to carry mail over double or triple distances without rest stops. These horses were selected for absolutely maximum endurance and had proven they could maintain speed over 40-50-mile distances when normal horses would collapse. They were stationed at strategic points along the route for emergencies. Relief horses saved the Pony Express system multiple times when Indian attacks or severe weather disrupted normal operations. Famous example, Lightning carried mail 76 miles without stopping when Paiute warriors attacked 3 consecutive relay stations in Nevada, keeping the mail service operational during a crisis. Why they're gone. Like all Pony Express horses, the breeding program ended when the telegraph made mounted mail delivery obsolete. 12. The Apache warhorse. Apache warriors bred horses specifically for desert warfare, creating animals that could travel vast distances without water and remain completely silent during raids. Apache warhorses were taught to move without making sound, could survive on desert plants that would poison other horses, and developed such endurance they could outrun cavalry mounts over long distances. These horses were so perfectly adapted to desert warfare that Army cavalry units struggled to track or catch Apache raiders mounted on them. Famous example, Geronimo's stallion Windrunner was never captured, despite dozens of cavalry pursuits, and was known for being able to climb rock faces that seemed impossible for horses. Why they're gone. When Apache resistance ended and the tribe was moved to reservations, their warhorse breeding traditions were lost. 13. The buffalo hunter horse. Professional buffalo hunters needed horses that could work around massive herds of dangerous animals while remaining calm during constant gunfire. Buffalo hunter horses had to be fearless around buffalo, which could weigh 2,000 pounds and charge at 35 millimeters when threatened. They also had to carry hunters' heavy rifles and ammunition across vast prairie territories. These horses learned to position themselves for optimal shooting angles and could detect dangerous buffalo behavior before their riders noticed problems. Famous example, Big 50, owned by hunter Billy Dixon, worked around buffalo herds for 5 years and was present during the famous long-distance shot at Adobe Walls that helped end the Second Battle of Adobe Walls. Why they're gone. Commercial buffalo hunting ended when the herds were exterminated by the 1880s, eliminating the need for these specialized horses. 14. The Cavalry Trooper Horse U.S. Cavalry horses had to carry armed soldiers into battle while remaining calm under fire and maintaining formation during complex military maneuvers. Cavalry Trooper horses underwent extensive training to ignore gunfire, charge enemy positions on command, and work as part of coordinated units during battle. They carried fully equipped soldiers plus weapons and ammunition over long patrol distances. These horses had to be brave enough for combat, but disciplined enough to respond instantly to bugle calls and other military signals. Famous example, Comanche, the famous survivor of Little Bighorn, was typical of cavalry horses that could fight in major battles and continue serving despite severe wounds. Why they're gone. Mechanized warfare eliminated cavalry units, and military horses were no longer needed for combat operations. 15. The Wells Fargo Express Horse. Wells Fargo's express delivery service required horses that could maintain exact schedules while carrying valuable cargo through bandit-infested territory. Wells Fargo Express horses had to be fast enough to outrun robbers, strong enough to pull heavily loaded wagons, and reliable enough to maintain precise delivery schedules that businesses depended on. These horses often worked routes where they were specifically targeted by outlaws trying to steal valuable shipments, requiring exceptional speed and endurance. Famous example, the 6-horse team that pulled the treasure coach between Virginia City and Carson City successfully outran Black Bart and his gang on multiple occasions. Why they're gone. Railroad express services replaced wagon-based delivery, eliminating the need for these specialized transportation horses. 16. The frontier doctor horse. Rural doctors needed horses that could travel through any weather conditions to reach patients, often covering vast territories with minimal roads. Frontier doctor horses had to be absolutely reliable in emergencies, capable of finding their way in darkness or blizzards, and calm enough to work around medical procedures that might involve screaming patients. These horses often meant the difference between life and death for frontier families, carrying doctors to emergency calls across dangerous territory. Famous example, Doc Holliday's horse, Prescription, was famous for being able to navigate to remote homesteads in complete darkness and never refused to travel regardless of weather conditions. Why they're gone. Improved roads and eventually motorized transportation eliminated the need for horses in medical practice. 17. The frontier marshal. Horsetown marshals and sheriffs needed horses that could pursue criminals across any terrain while remaining calm during gunfights and standoffs. Frontier marshal horses had to be fast enough to chase fleeing outlaws, brave enough to remain steady during shootouts, and intelligent enough to work in dangerous situations where a spooked horse could get their rider killed. These horses often became famous alongside their lawman riders and were specifically targeted by outlaws who knew that killing a marshal's horse was an effective way to eliminate their pursuit. Famous example, Wyatt Earp's stallion Justice was present during the gunfight at the OK Corral and several other famous shootouts in Tombstone. Why they're gone. As frontier towns became civilized and law enforcement became more organized, the era of individual marshals patrolling vast territories ended. 18. The frontier preacher. Horse circuit riding preachers needed horses that could cover enormous territories to bring religious services to isolated frontier communities. Frontier preacher horses had to be incredibly hardy to travel between widely scattered settlements, calm enough to work around camp meetings and baptisms, and reliable enough to find their way across unmarked wilderness. These horses often carried not just preachers, but also Bibles, hymnals, and other religious materials to communities that had no other access to organized religion. Famous example, the Methodist circuit rider Peter Cartwright's horse Pilgrim traveled over 12,000 miles annually for 15 years, visiting remote settlements throughout the frontier. Why they're gone. As churches were established in settled communities, circuit riders were no longer needed. 19. The trading post. Horse remote trading posts required horses that could carry valuable trade goods across dangerous territories and work around potentially hostile Native American customers. Trading post horses had to be strong enough to carry heavy loads of furs and trade goods, calm enough to work in tense situations where misunderstandings could trigger violence, and hardy enough to survive in remote locations. These horses were often valuable enough that they became targets for theft, requiring them to be kept under guard and trained to work in high-security situations. Famous example, William Bent's horses at Bent's Fort were famous for remaining calm during negotiations with various Plains tribes and never spooked during the dangerous process of trading with armed warriors. Why they're gone. Railroad transportation eliminated remote trading posts and the need for pack horses in the fur trade. 20. The last frontier horse. As the frontier disappeared, a few horses represented the end of an era. Animals that had worked the last cattle drives, carried the last mountain men, and patrolled the final lawless territories. These horses witnessed the transformation of the Wild West into modern America and represented bloodlines that would never be needed again as civilization replaced wilderness. Many of these final frontier horses lived into the 20th century, becoming living links to a vanished world that their descendants would never experience. Famous example, Old Blue, the lead steer of countless cattle drives, was accompanied by a horse named Farewell, who worked the last great drives from Texas to Montana before railroads ended the era forever. Why they're gone. The closing of the frontier eliminated the conditions that created these specialized horses, and modern life had no use for their extraordinary abilities. The end of an era. These 20 horse breeds represent more than just lost bloodlines. They tell the story of America's transformation from wilderness to civilization. Each breed was perfectly adapted to survive specific challenges that no longer exist in modern America. Every one of these horses possessed abilities that seem almost impossible by today's standards, because they lived in a world that demanded the impossible every single day. They could survive conditions that would kill modern horses, work longer hours than we would consider humane, and perform tasks that required intelligence and courage we rarely see today. The American frontier wasn't conquered by humans alone. It was won by partnerships between riders and horses so specialized that they couldn't survive when those challenges disappeared. When the railroad connected the coasts, when law came to lawless territories, when wilderness became farmland, these remarkable horses were no longer needed. Modern horses live safer, easier lives, but they've lost the extraordinary abilities that their ancestors needed to survive on the frontier. We've traded spectacular capability for comfort and security, and perhaps that's the natural evolution of both horses and human civilization. These forgotten breeds remind us that the relationship between humans and animals can reach levels of cooperation and mutual adaptation that create capabilities neither could achieve alone. The Wild West was built on partnerships that pushed both species beyond what either could accomplish independently. Which of these forgotten horses impressed you the most? And do you think modern horses could survive the conditions their ancestors faced every day? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through the lost horses of the American frontier, subscribe for more videos that reveal the incredible true stories behind Wild West history, because the real story is always more extraordinary than any legend. Next week, we're exploring the most dangerous jobs in frontier towns, occupations so deadly they make modern extreme sports look like children's games. You won't believe what people were willing to do to survive in the Old West.